I was arranging the last candle on our mahogany dining table when David's phone, forgotten on the kitchen counter, lit up with an incoming message. Through the locked screen, I glimpsed words that would shatter my world. Missing you already, darling. Last night was magical. When can we... The preview cut off there, but my heart had already stopped. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone, but the screen had gone dark. I stared at my reflection in the black surface, a ghost of the confident woman I'd once been. The sender's name burned in my memory, Isabella Montenegro. A name I'd never heard before. I gripped the marble counter until my knuckles turned white, fighting the nausea rising in my throat. 3 years of marriage, and I was discovering my husband's secrets through glimpsed text messages. The front door opened with its familiar creak. "Honey, I'm home." David's voice carried its usual warmth, but now it sounded like a performance. I forced myself to breathe normally to arrange my face into the welcoming smile he expected. David walked into our Pacific Heights Victorian kitchen, loosening the burgundy tie I'd bought him for his birthday. At 34, he was still devastatingly handsome, the kind of man who turned heads at dinner parties and made other wives tell me how lucky I was. "Something smells incredible," he said, kissing my cheek with lips that felt suddenly foreign against my skin. "Braised short ribs with that wine reduction you love." My voice sounded hollow, echoing in my own ears. David's phone buzzed again. This time, he snatched it up with practiced quickness, glancing at the screen before sliding it into his pocket. The movement was so swift, so rehearsed, that I realized he'd been doing this for months. "Work?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "The Peterson Project. You know how demanding clients get before deadlines." He smiled, that charming smile that had once made me feel like the center of his universe. Now it looked calculated, artificial. We sat down to dinner, and I watched my husband cut into the meat I'd spent 4 hours preparing. He complimented the flavor, asked about my interior design projects, shared an amusing story about his law partner. Everything was perfectly normal, except for the way he kept his phone face down beside his plate. Except for the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. Except for the sick certainty growing in my stomach that nothing would ever be normal again. After dinner, David excused himself to his home office, the mahogany-paneled sanctuary that had been off limits since we'd moved into this house 2 years ago. "Confidential client documents," he'd always explained. "You understand." I'd understood. I'd been understanding about everything. I cleaned the kitchen mechanically, my hands moving through familiar motions while my mind spun in desperate circles. A wine glass slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering against the travertine floor. The crystal fragments scattered like tiny diamonds, each piece reflecting the kitchen's warm lighting back at me. As I knelt to collect the shards, one cut deep into my finger. Blood welled up, but the physical pain felt insignificant compared to the emotional wound that had been festering without my knowledge. My phone rang. Sarah Martinez, my best friend, since Stanford video calling from her marketing firm in Soma. "Elena, you look terrible. What's wrong?" I glanced toward David's office, making sure the door remained closed. "Sarah, I think David might be..." I found a text message on his phone from someone named Isabella. Sarah's expression sharpened immediately. She'd never trusted David completely, though she'd been diplomatic enough not to voice her concerns. "What kind of message?" "Something about missing him and last night being magical." The words tasted bitter. "Elena, honey, that doesn't sound good at all. What are you going to do?" Before I could answer, David emerged from his office, scrolling through his phone with that same secretive expression I'd noticed earlier. "I have to go," I whispered, ending the call quickly. David looked up. "Who was that?" "Sarah, just catching up." I stood brushing glass fragments from my knees. "You should be more careful," he said, noticing the broken glass and my bleeding finger. But his tone was distracted cold. The David I'd married would have rushed to check my injury, insisted on bandaging it himself. This David just stepped around the glass and headed upstairs. I spent the next hour at our kitchen island staring at the spot where the wine glass had shattered, trying to piece together months of small deceptions I'd ignored or explained away. The late nights that had become increasingly frequent. The business trips that seemed to multiply. The growing emotional distance I'd blamed on work stress. When I finally went upstairs, David was already in bed facing away from me. I slipped under the covers quietly, but sleep was impossible. At 2:17 a.m., his phone buzzed with another message. In the darkness, the screen's glow was like a beacon. David stirred, but didn't wake. He'd had 2 glasses of wine with dinner, unusual for a weeknight. My heart pounded as I carefully reached across him and picked up his phone. The messages were from Isabella again.
Can't stop thinking about our weekend in Napa. The vineyard suite was perfect.
I'm lying here wishing you were with me instead of her. My vision blurred. Napa Valley. Last weekend, David had told me he was attending a legal conference in Sacramento. He'd even complained about how boring the presentations would be. He'd been with her instead. With shaking fingers, I scrolled through their conversation history. Months of intimate exchanges revealed themselves. Photos of expensive dinners, references to hotels and weekend getaways, plans for future trips. But what cut deepest were David's messages about me.
Elena's so naive. She believed the Sacramento story completely. She's always been gullible. Makes this easier, honestly. Don't worry about her finding out. She trusts me completely.
The words hit like physical blows. This wasn't just betrayal, it was mockery. He wasn't simply cheating, he was laughing about how easy it was to deceive me. I set the phone back carefully and crept to the bathroom, gripping the marble vanity as I stared at my reflection. At 31, I looked older than my years, with stress lines around my eyes and a pallor that spoke of months of unconscious worry. When had I stopped taking care of myself? When had I become this anxious, hollow-eyed woman who looked more like a ghost than a wife? The anger hit me then, hot, pure, and clarifying. It burned away the hurt and confusion, leaving behind something I hadn't felt in years: determination. I wasn't going to be naive Elena anymore. I wasn't going to be the trusting wife who made it easy for her husband to betray her. But I also couldn't be reckless. David was a lawyer, a skilled one, and I couldn't afford mistakes. I needed evidence, allies, and a plan. I needed to become someone David had never seen before. By morning, I had decided the war for my life was about to begin. But David didn't know it yet. The next morning dawned gray and foggy. I woke at 6:00 a.m. after maybe 90 minutes of actual sleep, but my mind felt sharper than it had in months. David was still unconscious beside me, one arm flung across my pillow. I dressed quietly in dark jeans and a black sweater clothes that would help me blend into shadows if necessary. Today, I was going to become a detective in my own life. David's phone lay on his nightstand, but I knew better than to risk accessing it again. Instead, I needed physical evidence, documents, receipts, anything that could prove what I'd seen in those messages. In the kitchen, I made coffee with mechanical precision while formulating a plan. David kept important papers in his home office, but that room stayed locked when he wasn't there. However, during our house hunting process 3 years ago, I'd learned that Victorian homes often had quirks. This house used a skeleton key system. One master key opened multiple interior doors. The bedroom key might work throughout the house. David emerged at 7:15 a.m., already dressed in his navy Hugo Boss suit. He kissed my forehead with the same perfunctory gesture he'd performed every morning for months.
Late client meeting tonight? He said, grabbing his travel mug. Don't wait up.
Which client? The question slipped out before I could stop it.
David paused his hand on the door handle. The Harrison Development downtown. Why?
No reason, just wondering. I forced a smile. Have a good day. After his BMW pulled out of our driveway, I waited exactly 15 minutes to ensure he wouldn't return for forgotten items. Then I grabbed the bedroom key and headed for his office. My hands shook as I inserted the key. It turned easily. David's office was a shrine to his Success Law School diplomas, architectural awards, photos with important clients. but the massive mahogany desk drew my attention. If he was hiding something, it would be there. The drawers were locked, but I remembered seeing David use a small key kept in a ceramic bowl on the bookshelf. I found it beneath loose change and paper clips. The first 3 drawers contained routine supplies and client files. But the bottom drawer was different, deeper than the others, with a single manila envelope tucked into the back corner. Inside, I found my first real evidence credit card statements for an account I'd never seen. The charges told a devastating story. Monthly payments to Bay Area luxury suites, $3,200 every month for 8 months. Expensive restaurants I'd never been to: Gary Danko, Atelier Cren, the French Laundry. Jewelry purchases from Tiffany & Co., totaling over $18,000. Most damning was a hotel receipt from Napa Valley, dated the exact weekend David had supposedly been at his legal conference. 2 nights at Auberge du Soleil, the Valley's most expensive resort. The bill showed couples massages, champagne service, and romantic dinners for 2. I photographed everything with my phone, my hand steadying as anger replaced fear. At the bottom of the envelope, I found something that made me gasp: a lease agreement for a luxury Marina Bay apartment. The lessee was Isabella Montenegro, but the financial guarantor was David Hartwell. My husband was keeping his mistress in a $4,800 per month apartment while I carefully budgeted our grocery expenses. I was photographing the lease when I heard a car door slam outside. Through the office window, I saw David's BMW in the driveway. Panic flooded my system. I quickly returned documents to the envelope, locked the drawer, and replaced the key. By the time David's key turned in the front door, I was in the kitchen, apparently absorbed in a design magazine. "Forget something," I called out, hoping my voice sounded normal. "Client file," he said, heading straight for his office. "Just need to grab it." I heard the office door open and close, followed by drawers opening. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had I put everything back exactly right? David emerged with a thick folder, but his eyes were sharp, suspicious. "You've been busy this morning. I can smell coffee in my office." "I was dusting in there earlier," I lied smoothly. "The cleaning lady missed a spot on your bookshelf yesterday." David studied my face for a long moment, then nodded and left again. As soon as his car disappeared, I called Sarah. "I need to see you immediately, and I need legal advice." "I'll clear my schedule. Come to my office in an hour." Sarah's marketing firm occupied the top floors of a glass building in Soma. Her corner office overlooked the Bay Bridge, and on clear days, you could see Oakland. Today, fog hung low over the water. "Jesus, Elena," Sarah breathed as I showed her the photographs. "He's not just cheating, he's funding an entire second life." "I know, but what can I legally do? We have a prenuptial agreement." Sarah's expression darkened. "Show me that prenup." I pulled up the document on my phone. I'd photographed it months ago during a moment of idle curiosity. Sarah read carefully, her frown deepening. "Elena, this prenup heavily favors David. If you divorce, you'd keep only separate property, essentially what you owned before marriage plus personal income. Everything else gets split 50-50. But my parents paid the house down payment. I funded all renovations with my design business money. Doesn't matter legally. Once you signed this, those became marital assets." Sarah leaned back. "However, there's something interesting. This prenup has a morality clause." "What's that?" "If either party commits adultery, the innocent spouse gets a larger share of marital assets. David's affair could work in your favor, but you'd need ironclad proof." "I have credit card statements, hotel receipts." "That's circumstantial. You need something more direct. Photos, communications, witness testimony." Sarah studied me carefully. "Elena, are you prepared to do what it takes?" I thought about David's smug confidence, his casual mockery of my trust, the way he'd kiss me goodbye while planning to spend the evening with another woman. "Yes, I'm prepared." Sarah made calls and arranged a meeting with Marcus Chen, a former SFPD detective who now ran discreet investigations. We met at a Mission District coffee shop, neutral territory. Marcus was small and wiry in his 50s, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "So, standard adultery investigation runs about $3,500, he said after hearing our situation. I'll need 1 week to establish patterns, get photographs, document activities. You sure you want to know what I find?
I need to know. Fair enough. But while I'm working, you need to act completely normal. Don't change routines. Don't confront your husband. Don't give him any reason to suspect. Can you do that?
The thought of continuing to share a bed with David, to smile and make conversation while knowing what I knew, made my skin crawl. But I nodded.
I can do that.
That evening, David returned at 10:30 p.m. claiming his client meeting had run late. He smelled like expensive perfume and wine.
Already 8,
he said when I offered dinner.
Client took me to Boulevard. You know how these things go.
Boulevard was one of Isabella's favorite restaurants according to the credit card statements. David was lying to my face with casual ease.
How nice, I said. I saved you some soup if you change your mind.
David looked almost surprised by my pleasant response. Had he been expecting suspicion? Some sign that I was seeing through his deception. Instead, I was learning to lie as skillfully as he did. Over the following week, I maintained the performance of the perfect wife, while Marcus documented my husband's betrayal. I made David's favorite meals, asked about his day, even suggested we plan a weekend getaway, all while photographing suspicious receipts I found in jacket pockets and noting times he claimed to be working late. On Thursday evening, David announced he'd be out of town the following weekend.
Legal conference in Portland, he said. Boring presentations, but good for networking.
Of course, I said, knowing this was probably another romantic getaway with Isabella.
I'll miss you.
He kissed my cheek, and I managed not to flinch. But that night, I made my first mistake. Unable to sleep, I crept back to David's office around 2 a.m., using the master key to search for more evidence. I was photographing additional credit card statements when I heard footsteps upstairs. David was awake. I quickly returned everything and slipped out of the office, but as I tiptoed toward the kitchen, a floorboard creaked loudly. The footsteps above stopped.
Elena,
David's voice called from the top of the stairs.
You okay down there?
My heart pounded so hard, I was sure he could hear it. Just getting some water, I called back quickly, moving to the kitchen sink. Couldn't sleep. David appeared at the top of the stairs in his pajamas, studying me with sharp eyes.
Everything all right?
Fine, just restless. I filled a glass with water, my hands trembling slightly. He watched me for what felt like an eternity before nodding and disappearing back into the bedroom. The next morning, I noticed David checking his office more carefully than usual, his eyes scanning the desk and bookshelf. He suspected something, but couldn't quite put his finger on what. I had to be more careful. One mistake could ruin everything. Friday afternoon, Marcus called. I have everything you need. Can you meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.?
David will be out of town. Perfect timing.
Mrs. Rodriguez. You're going to want to bring Sarah to this meeting. What I found? It's worse than you think. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while David packed for his conference. I felt like I was standing on a cliff's edge about to jump into an abyss. Once I saw Marcus's evidence, there would be no going back. But the woman who had discovered that text message a week ago was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. I was ready to see exactly how deep David's betrayal went. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. I sat across from Marcus Chen in our usual Mission District coffee shop, Sarah beside me for support, while a thick manila envelope lay unopened between us like a bomb waiting to detonate. Before I show you this, Marcus said gently, understand that what you're about to see will change everything. Are you absolutely certain you're ready? I thought about David's goodbye kiss that morning, perfunctory and cold, about the way he'd hummed while packing, probably anticipating his weekend with Isabella. About 3 years of marriage, where I'd blamed myself for every growing distance.
I'm ready.
Marcus opened the envelope and spread photographs across the table. The first showed David entering a luxury Marina Bay apartment building, the same address from Isabella's lease agreement. Your husband visits this location every Tuesday and Thursday evening, staying 2 to 4 hours, Marcus explained. He has his own key. The next photographs were devastating. David and Isabella at intimate dinners, walking hand in hand through Union Square, kissing in her apartment doorway. In every image, they looked deeply in love, the way David and I had looked in our early photos, before marriage turned us into polite strangers.
This woman,
Sarah said, studying Isabella's face.
she's gorgeous.
Isabella Montenegro was indeed striking, tall and elegant, with long, dark hair and effortless sophistication. She looked nothing like me. Where I was petite and blonde, with girl-next-door features, she was dramatic and glamorous.
There's more,
Marcus said, producing weekend photos.
These were taken in Portland.
My heart sank. David hadn't even bothered with creative lies. The photos showed them at Powell's Books, sharing coffee at sidewalk cafes, checking into the Nob Hill Riviera Hotel. In one intimate shot, David was fastening a necklace around Isabella's neck while she smiled at their reflection in a mirror. I recognized the necklace, delicate gold, with a diamond pendant I'd admired in Tiffany's window 6 months ago. When I'd pointed it out, David had dismissed it as overpriced jewelry store nonsense. Apparently, it was only overpriced when I wanted it. The financial investigation was even more revealing. Marcus continued producing bank statements. Your husband has been systematically hiding income and assets. His actual earnings are about 50% higher than what he's declared to you. The documents showed complex deception. David had been redirecting salary portions to secret accounts, then using those funds to finance his relationship with Isabella. The luxury apartment, expensive dinners, jewelry weekend getaways, all represented money that should have been going toward our shared future.
He's also been using joint credit cards for affair-related expenses, Marcus said. Technically, you're financially responsible for funding your husband's infidelity.
The irony was breathtaking. While I'd been carefully budgeting household expenses and choosing generic grocery brands to save money, David had been living a double life, funded by credit cards bearing my name. Sarah was studying financial documents with sharp focus.
Elena, this isn't just adultery.
This is financial fraud. David has been stealing from your marriage.
What can I do about it?
Marcus leaned forward.
Here's where it gets interesting. I've been investigating Isabella Montenegro, and she's not who she appears to be.
He produced another photograph, Isabella entering a downtown law office.
She's married, Marcus said simply. Has been for 6 years. Her husband is Dr. Richard Montenegro, a prominent cardiologist at UCSF. They live in a $3.2 million Pacific Heights house about 8 blocks from yours.
The revelation hit like a physical blow. Isabella wasn't just David's mistress, she was another married woman betraying her own spouse.
Dr. Montenegro has no idea, Marcus continued. I confirmed through discreet inquiries. He believes she works late as a real estate consultant.
Sarah shook her head.
So David is having an affair with another man's wife, using marital assets to fund it while both lie to their spouses.
Yeah.
It gets worse, Marcus said. Isabella Montenegro isn't her real name. Born Isabella Vasquez in Los Angeles, she has a history of targeting wealthy married men. Before marrying Dr. Montenegro, she was involved with at least 2 other married men in L.A. Both ended up divorced and financially ruined. The pattern became clear. Isabella was a professional predator who specialized in seducing successful married men and extracting maximum money before moving to her next target. David isn't having an affair, I said slowly. He's being conned. That's my assessment, Marcus agreed. Though it doesn't excuse his behavior toward you. He chose to betray his marriage regardless of Isabella's motivations.
I stared at photographs scattered across the table, evidence of months of systematic deception and financial theft. Part of me felt vindicated that my instincts had been correct. But a larger part felt devastated by the scope of David's lies.
What do I do now? Sarah was already pulling out her phone. Now we call the best divorce attorney in San Francisco. Wait, I said. I want to confront him first. I want to look him in the eye and make him admit everything. Marcus shook his head. Bad idea. If you tip him off, he'll have time to hide assets, destroy evidence, maybe turn the situation around somehow. Surprise is your biggest advantage. Elena. Sarah said gently. David has been lying to your face for months. He's not going to suddenly become honest because you ask him to.
I knew they were right, but part of me still wanted to give David a chance to explain, to show remorse, to prove the man I'd married still existed.
1 week, I said finally. Give me 1 week to decide how to handle this.
Marcus gathered photographs.
1 week, but don't let on that you know anything. And start protecting yourself financially. Open your own account, secure important documents, consider where you'll stay if you need to leave quickly. That afternoon, while David enjoyed his romantic Portland weekend, I drove across town and opened a personal checking account. I deposited $5,000 from my business account money that was indisputably mine. Then I went home and systematically photographed every important document: insurance policies, financial statements, property deeds, tax returns. If David tried to hide assets or claim ignorance, I would have proof of everything.
As I worked, I thought about the woman I'd been 2 weeks ago, trusting, accommodating, always giving David the benefit of the doubt. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone naive who'd allowed herself to be systematically exploited.
The woman I was becoming was harder, smarter, and infinitely less forgiving.
David returned Sunday evening with a tan and guilty smile, claiming the Portland conference had been surprisingly productive. He brought me a small gift, a coffee mug from Powell's Books that probably cost less than the appetizers he'd shared with Isabella.
How was your weekend? He asked, settling beside me on the couch.
Quiet, I said. I missed you. The lie came easier than expected. Maybe I was learning to deceive as skillfully as David.
I missed you too,
he said, but his attention was already drifting to his phone, probably checking for Isabella's messages. That night, as David slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and made my decision. Marcus was right. David had forfeited any right to honesty or confrontation. He'd chosen deception and betrayal.
Now he would face the consequences.
But I had to be smarter than he was. I had to be patient, careful, and absolutely ruthless.
The war was about to begin in earnest. Monday morning, October 23rd, 9th, 15 a.m. I sat across from Catherine Sullivan, one of San Francisco's most formidable divorce attorneys. Her steel-gray eyes cataloged every detail as she reviewed Marcus's evidence in her mahogany-paneled office. Mrs. Rodriguez, Catherine said, studying our prenup with a gold Mont Blanc pen, your husband made several critical errors. This morality clause is ironclad. If we can prove adultery, you're entitled to 75% of marital assets plus attorney fees. She outlined our strategy with military precision file for divorce, citing adultery, request emergency spousal support, and exclusive use of the marital home subpoena, David's financial records, to uncover additional hidden assets. The key is speed and surprise, Catherine explained. We serve him Friday at his office, maximum impact, minimum warning. Won't he fight back? Catherine smiled coldly. Of course, but men like your husband typically underestimate their wives. He's been getting away with deception so long, he probably thinks you're too weak to challenge him effectively.
2 hours later, I walked into Wells Fargo with a letter from Catherine's office. The branch manager read the document with increasing concern.
We'll freeze all joint accounts immediately, he said nervously. You'll retain access to individual accounts, but joint assets will be locked pending court orders.
By 4 p.m., David would discover his credit cards weren't working. His secret accounts would remain accessible, but the joint funds he'd been using to finance his double life would be locked tight. I spent the week maintaining my facade while internally preparing for war. I made David's favorite dinners, listened to fabricated work stories, smiled when he claimed to be working late. On Wednesday evening, David announced another weekend trip.
Client emergency in Los Angeles, flying down Friday morning, back Sunday night.
Another romantic getaway with Isabella, probably funded by his secret accounts since joint credit cards were frozen.
Poor timing, I said sympathetically. But I understand these emergencies can't be helped. David looked surprised by my accommodation.
Had he expected questions, suspicion?
Instead, I was becoming an expert deceiver myself.
But Wednesday night, I made a nearly fatal mistake. Unable to resist, I crept back to David's office around 1 a.m., looking for additional evidence. I was photographing bank statements when I heard movement upstairs. David was getting up for his usual middle-of-the-night bathroom visit.
I quickly returned documents and slipped toward the kitchen, but in my haste, I knocked over a small ceramic bowl on David's desk. It hit the floor with a loud crash. The footsteps above stopped completely. "Elena," David's voice called from upstairs. "What was that noise?" My heart hammered as I quickly swept up ceramic pieces, cutting my finger in the process. "Sorry, I was getting water and knocked over a glass. I'm cleaning it up." David appeared at the top of the stairs, studying me with sharp, suspicious eyes. I was kneeling by the kitchen sink, holding the broken bowl pieces, a small trickle of blood on my finger from where a shard had cut me. "You're bleeding," he said, coming downstairs. "Just a small cut from the glass." I showed him the ceramic pieces. "I was getting water and bumped into the counter. Clumsy me." David examined the broken bowl. Fortunately, it was an ordinary kitchen item, not something from his office. But his eyes remained suspicious as he helped me bandage my finger. "You've been restless lately," he observed. "Everything okay?" "Just work stress. The Morrison project has been keeping me up." He studied my face for a long moment before nodding and returning upstairs. But I noticed him checking his office more thoroughly the next morning, his eyes scanning the desk where the ceramic bowl had been. I'd come dangerously close to exposing myself. I couldn't afford another mistake. Friday afternoon, Catherine called with news that made my blood run cold.
"Elena, we have a problem. David hired Vincent Torino, a private investigator with a very questionable reputation. My sources say Torino specializes in manufacturing evidence when legitimate investigation fails."
"What kind of evidence? Fake affairs, financial improprieties, mental health issues, anything to shift focus from their client's misconduct. You need to be extremely careful about your activities." That evening, while David was supposedly flying to Los Angeles, I noticed a car following me as I drove to Sarah's apartment. A black sedan with tinted windows stayed 3 cars back, turning when I turned, stopping when I stopped. My mouth went dry. Vincent Torino was already at work. I called Sarah from her apartment. "I think I'm being followed." "David's moving faster than we expected. From now on, don't go anywhere alone. Don't meet anyone who could be misconstrued as romantic, and document everything." Saturday morning brought worse news. Catherine called while I was having coffee with Sarah at our usual Mission Cafe. "Elena, David's attorney filed a countersuit yesterday. They're claiming you've been having an affair with Marcus Chen, that you hired him for romantic purposes rather than legitimate investigation." "That's completely insane," I said loud enough that other customers stared. "I know it's false, but they have photographs of you meeting with Marcus taken out of context to suggest intimacy. There's also a fabricated witness statement claiming someone saw you leaving a hotel together." My hands shook with rage. "They're manufacturing evidence!" "Exactly. It's desperate, but it could complicate our case. I need detailed records of every interaction you've had with Marcus, dates, times, locations, witnesses." Sarah was already pulling out her phone. "I was present for most of those meetings. I can testify about their professional nature." "Good. We'll also have Marcus testify about his investigation methods. This fabricated affair won't survive scrutiny, but it shows David's desperation." But the real shock came that afternoon. I was working late at my design studio when Marcus called with urgent news. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you need to know that your husband met with some very dangerous people today. I've been maintaining surveillance, and David spent 2 hours with Vincent Torino and 2 men I recognize from organized crime families." My blood turned to ice. "Organized crime enforcers, the kind of people who specialize in intimidation and worse. If David hired them, it means he's planning to fight very dirty indeed." "What should I do?" "Be extremely cautious. Don't go anywhere alone, vary your routes, and consider staying somewhere David can't find you. These people don't just manufacture evidence, they manufacture fear." I was driving home from the studio when I realized I was being followed again, not by the black sedan this time, but by a large SUV with 2 silhouettes inside. When I turned into a gas station to see what they'd do, they drove past but parked at a restaurant across the street. My hands were shaking as I called Sarah. "I think I'm in real danger." "Come to my apartment immediately. Don't go home." But as I was leaving the gas station, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mrs. Rodriguez." The voice was gravelly menacing. "We need to have a conversation about the trouble you're causing your husband." "Who is this Someone who solves problems for reasonable people. Your husband is a reasonable man. We hope you can be reasonable too. The line went dead. I drove to Sarah's apartment through back streets, constantly checking my mirrors. The SUV was gone, but I felt eyes on me everywhere. At Sarah's, I collapsed into her guest room, finally understanding that David wasn't just fighting to save his assets, he was fighting to destroy me completely. We need to accelerate everything, Sarah said grimly. David has crossed a line by involving criminals. This isn't just about divorce anymore, it's about your safety. That night, lying in Sarah's guest bed, I realized the stakes had changed completely. David wasn't the weak, cheating husband I'd thought he was. He was someone willing to use intimidation, fabricated evidence, and possibly violence to get what he wanted. But he'd made one critical error. He'd assumed I would be frightened into submission. Instead, he'd awakened something fierce and uncompromising in me, a woman who would fight back with everything she had, no matter how dangerous it became. The war was about to escalate beyond anything either of us had imagined. Sunday night brought the call I'd been dreading. David, supposedly returning from his Los Angeles trip, sounded different, colder, more calculated. Elena, we need to have a serious conversation when I get home. About our future. Of course, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. I'll be here. But I wouldn't be. Sarah and I had spent the day planning, and I was staying at her apartment indefinitely. However, David didn't need to know that yet. An hour later, my phone rang. Sarah's voice was tight with worry. Elena? I just got a call from my building security. 2 men were asking about you, said they were process servers, but the description matches the guys Marcus saw with Torino. They know where I live. My blood went cold. They're escalating. Catherine wants to meet tomorrow morning. She says we need to move fast. David's desperation is making him dangerous. Monday morning, Catherine's office felt like a war room. She'd called in additional support, a former FBI agent named Rebecca Torres, who specialized in cases involving criminal intimidation. Mrs. Rodriguez, Rebecca said, studying my photos of the black sedan and SUV, your husband has made a critical error. By involving organized crime figures in a civil dispute, he's potentially committed federal crimes. We can use this. Catherine nodded grimly. We're filing for an emergency restraining order this afternoon, and we're also contacting the FBI about the intimidation attempts. David thinks he's gaining an advantage, but he's actually destroying himself. What about the fabricated affair allegations? Marcus and I have been working on that, Rebecca said with a cold smile. We're going to turn it around on them. She explained the plan. Instead of simply defending against the false accusations, we were going to expose Vincent Torino's methods by catching him in the act of fabricating evidence. We're going to give Torino an opportunity to create more false evidence. But this time, we'll be recording everything. When we expose his methods in court, it will destroy not just the fake affair story, but David's credibility entirely. The plan was risky but brilliant. I would meet with a male colleague from my design firm, completely innocent and professional, but in a location where Torino's surveillance team could photograph us. However, Marcus's counter-surveillance would capture Torino's people, staging compromising photos. The key is that you behave completely professionally, Rebecca explained. No physical contact, no intimate conversation, purely business. When they try to present doctored or misleadingly captioned photos, we'll have video evidence of what actually happened. Tuesday afternoon, I met with James Henderson, a gay colleague from my firm at a downtown hotel restaurant, to discuss a potential client project. We chose a booth in the hotel lobby cafe, public, well-lit, completely appropriate for a business meeting. Elena, James said, reviewing the client portfolio I'd brought, this Singapore development project looks incredible. The design budget alone is larger than anything we've handled. I know. It could really put our firm on the international map. I kept my voice professional, my posture businesslike. Through the restaurant's windows, I spotted a familiar figure, one of the men I'd seen following me now, positioned across the street with a telephoto camera. 20 minutes later, as James and I shook hands goodbye in the hotel lobby, I noticed camera flashes from multiple locations. Torino's people were working hard to create their evidence, but Marcus's counter-surveillance team was capturing everything from concealed positions.
Wednesday morning, Catherine called with devastating news for David's side. Elena, it worked perfectly. Torino's people submitted photos to David's attorney showing you an intimate conversation with a mystery man at a hotel. But our video shows the entire meeting completely professional. No physical contact business documents visible on the table. What happens now? Now we spring the trap. We're requesting an emergency hearing to address the fraudulent evidence. When we present our video alongside their doctored photos, we're going to destroy David's case and probably get Vincent Torino arrested for fabricating evidence in a legal proceeding. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. I spent Wednesday night at a hotel under an assumed name using cash Sarah had given me. David's criminal associates had escalated their intimidation attempts. My design studio had been broken into, though nothing was stolen, and my car had been vandalized with threatening messages. Thursday morning brought the call that changed everything. Elena. Marcus said, his voice tight with excitement. We got them. Torino just approached James Henderson with an offer to pay him $10,000 to sign a statement claiming you two had been having an affair. What did James do? Exactly what we hoped. He pretended to consider it while wearing a recording device. We have Torino on tape offering to pay for false testimony and coaching James on what lies to tell. My heart pounded. That's suborning perjury. Federal crime, 5 years minimum. Torino is finished, and anyone who hired him is going down too. Friday morning, Judge Patricia Henley's courtroom was packed. David sat at the defendant's table, with Harrison Wells both looking confident they still thought their fabricated evidence would work. Catherine began by playing the audio recording of Torino offering to pay James for false testimony. The courtroom was silent as Torino's gravelly voice filled the air. Look, buddy, all you gotta do is sign a statement saying you and the lady were more than friends. 10 grand cash. Easy money. James's response was clear. You want me to lie under oath about having an affair with Elena Rodriguez? Not lie, just remember things differently. She's trying to screw her husband in divorce court. Guy's just trying to level the playing field. Judge Henley's face was stone as the recording ended. Catherine then presented our video evidence of the actual business meeting, followed by Torino's staged photographs with misleading captions. Your Honor, Catherine said, the defendants have engaged in a criminal conspiracy to manufacture evidence, suborn perjury, and obstruct justice. We request immediate sanctions and referral to federal prosecutors. Harrison Wells looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. David's face had gone ashen as he realized the scope of his legal exposure. Furthermore, Catherine continued, we have evidence that Mr. Hartwell hired known criminal associates to intimidate and threaten my client. She presented photographs of the men who'd been following me along with Marcus's documentation of their criminal records. Judge Henley's voice was ice cold when she spoke. Mr. Hartwell, you have engaged in conduct so egregious that this court questions whether you should retain your license to practice law. I'm granting an immediate restraining order prohibiting any contact with Mrs. Rodriguez, and I'm referring this matter to both the state bar and federal prosecutors. But David's lawyer had one more surprise. Your Honor, Harrison Wells said desperately, we have additional evidence that Mrs. Rodriguez has been systematically planning to defraud my client. She hired investigators, froze accounts, and orchestrated this entire scenario to maximize her financial gain. He presented emails between Sarah and me discussing strategy bank records, showing my account openings, even transcripts of our conversations with Marcus. My client may have made mistakes in his personal life. Wells continued, but Mrs. Rodriguez has engaged in calculated financial warfare designed to destroy him. For a moment, I felt the familiar fear return. Had we made mistakes that could be used against us? But Catherine was ready. Your Honor, Mrs. Rodriguez discovered that her husband was systematically stealing marital assets to fund an extramarital affair. Her actions were entirely defensive, protecting herself from ongoing financial fraud. Every step she took was legal, justified, and necessary. She presented David's secret credit card statements, the evidence of hidden income, the lease agreement for Isabella's apartment. Mr. Hartwell spent over $200,000 of marital funds on his mistress, while hiding his true income from his wife. Mrs. Rodriguez was protecting herself from a criminal who happened to be her husband. Judge Henley reviewed the evidence for what felt like hours. When she finally spoke, her words were devastating for David. "Mr. Hartwell, you have violated your marriage vows, stolen marital assets, hired criminals to intimidate your wife, and participated in fabricating evidence. This court awards Mrs. Rodriguez exclusive use of the marital home, 75% of all marital assets, 3 years of spousal support, and full attorney fees."
David's face crumpled. The confident, manipulative man who'd controlled me for years looked like a broken child.
"Furthermore," Judge Henley continued, "I'm recommending that the state bar investigate Mr. Hartwell's fitness to practice law." Outside the courthouse, Catherine was triumphant. "Elena, you didn't just win, you won everything. David's career is probably over, and he's facing potential federal charges."
But I felt no satisfaction watching my former husband's destruction.
Only profound sadness for how completely he'd ruined himself. "What happens now?" I asked.
"Now you rebuild your life. You have the financial resources, legal protection, and freedom to become whoever you want to be." That evening, I sat in my hotel room with a bottle of wine and a letter from Emma Chen in Singapore. She was offering me a position heading the interior design division at her international development firm.
"Elena," her letter read, "you've shown incredible strength and intelligence throughout this ordeal. I think Singapore could offer you the fresh start. You deserve new challenges, new culture, new opportunities to build something entirely your own." I looked out the hotel window at San Francisco's glittering skyline, the city where I'd been betrayed, where I'd fought back, where I'd discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. But it was also the city where I'd been someone else's victim for too long. It was time to become someone new, somewhere new. I opened my laptop and began typing my acceptance letter to Emma. The war was over. Now it was time to build the peace. 3 months later, I stood on the observation deck of Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, watching the sunset over one of the world's most dynamic cities. The skyline sparkled with ambition and possibility, everything I'd been missing in San Francisco. My apartment was a minimalist 2-bedroom unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. After years in David's traditional Victorian house, the clean lines and modern aesthetic felt like breathing fresh air after being trapped underwater. The transition hadn't been easy. Learning Singapore's business culture, understanding the complex racial and linguistic dynamics, adapting to the tropical climate, everything required conscious effort and patience. "Elena," my assistant Priya said during our morning briefing, "the Jakarta clients want to increase the project scope again. They're adding 2 more towers to the development." "That's incredible news, but can our team handle the additional workload? We'll need to hire 3 more designers and probably open a Jakarta satellite office." 6 months ago, I'd been fighting for my financial survival in a San Francisco courtroom. Now, I was running a rapidly expanding international design firm with projects across Southeast Asia. The work was challenging but exhilarating. Unlike the wealthy but conservative San Francisco clients, I'd served Asian developers wanted bold, innovative designs that pushed boundaries. My team of 12 designers came from 8 different countries, and our collaborative energy was unlike anything I'd experienced. "Super Elena," my colleague Wei Lin said during our weekly review, "the Singapore Straits Times wants to do a feature article about our firm's rapid growth. They're particularly interested in your story, American Woman Starting Over After a Difficult Divorce." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to leave the past completely behind to reinvent myself without reference to David's betrayal. But another part realized that my story might inspire other women trapped in similar situations. "Set it up," I said. "But I want to focus on the work we're doing, not just the personal drama." The article appeared 2 weeks later with the headline, "From Betrayal to Billions, American Designer Builds Empire After Divorce Victory." It included photos of our latest projects and a sidebar about the legal battle that had freed me to pursue international opportunities. The response was overwhelming. I received dozens of emails from women across Asia, sharing their own stories of overcoming betrayal and rebuilding their lives. Several asked for advice about starting their own businesses or pursuing careers after divorce. One email particularly moved me from a woman named Lin Wei in Kuala Lumpur. "Ms. Rodriguez, Your story gave me courage to leave my abusive marriage. I'm now studying interior design and dream of having my own firm someday. Would you consider mentoring young women like me who want to rebuild their lives through design? I immediately called Lin Wei and arranged to meet her during my next business trip to Malaysia. 6 months into my Singapore adventure, I received an unexpected visitor. Sarah flew in for a long weekend ostensibly to see my new life, but really to check on my emotional state. "Elena," she said as we sat in my apartment overlooking the harbor. "You look different, stronger, more confident than I've seen you in years. I feel different. Like I'm finally living my own life instead of trying to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be." Sarah studied my face carefully. "Any regrets about leaving San Francisco? About how things ended with David?" I thought about David's final appearance in court, broken, defeated, facing federal charges for conspiracy and wire fraud. Vincent Torino had pled guilty and received 3 years in federal prison. David's law license had been suspended pending a full investigation. "No regrets," I said finally. "David made his choices, and he's living with the consequences. I can't spend my life feeling guilty about protecting myself from someone who was systematically destroying me." "What about dating, meeting someone new?" I laughed. "Sarah, 6 months ago, I was fighting for my financial survival. Now I'm building an international business and figuring out who I am as an independent woman. Romance is the last thing on my mind." But that wasn't entirely true. The previous week, I'd had dinner with Dr. Michael Chen, a colleague of Emma's who worked for Doctors Without Borders. He was intelligent, funny, and refreshingly uncomplicated, someone whose worst character flaw seemed to be an obsession with Singaporean street food. We'd talked for 3 hours about everything except our past relationships, and I'd found myself genuinely enjoying male company for the first time since discovering David's betrayal. "You're smiling," Sarah observed. "There is someone." "Maybe. It's very early, very casual. But Sarah, for the first time in years, I'm not afraid of my own judgment. I trust myself to recognize red flags and make good decisions. That's the biggest change I see in you. You used to doubt yourself constantly, always looking for someone else's approval. Now you seem unshakable." 1 year after my divorce was finalized, I stood before an audience of 500 business leaders at the Asian Women Entrepreneurs Summit, delivering the keynote address on resilience and reinvention. My name is Elena Rodriguez. I began, and 18 months ago, I was a financially abused wife who nearly lost everything to a husband who systematically betrayed and exploited me. I told my story honestly, the discovery of David's affair, the financial fraud, the legal battle, the intimidation attempts. But I focused primarily on the choices I'd made and the strengths I'd discovered. "I could have remained a victim of David's betrayal," I said. "I could have accepted a minimal settlement and spent the rest of my life bitter about what he'd stolen from me. Instead, I chose to fight back with everything I had." The audience was completely engaged, many women nodding in recognition of their own struggles. "Today, I run an international design firm with offices in 4 countries. I earn 5 times what I made as a married woman in San Francisco. Most importantly, I wake up every morning excited about my work and my life, secure in the knowledge that my worth is determined by my own actions, not by anyone else's treatment of me." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of women approached me, sharing their stories, asking for advice, requesting mentorship opportunities. A young entrepreneur named Jennifer Liu, recently divorced and struggling to restart her consulting business, handed me her card with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed to hear that I could build something better." "You can," I assured her. "But first, you have to believe you deserve it." That evening, I received a call that surprised me. Emma was calling from her office in Singapore's financial district. "Elena, I have a proposition. The Singapore government is launching a new initiative to support women entrepreneurs across Southeast Asia. They want someone to head the program, someone with international business experience and a compelling personal story of overcoming adversity." "What kind of position?" "Director of Women's Economic Empowerment for the Singapore Development Authority. You'd oversee funding mentorship and training programs for female entrepreneurs across the region."
The salary is excellent, but more importantly, you'd be helping thousands of women build their own success stories. I was intrigued but hesitant. Emma, I've just gotten my design firm established. Can I really take on something this big? You wouldn't have to abandon your business. This would be a consulting role that complements your design work. Elena, you have the credibility, experience, and passion to make a real difference. 2 weeks later, I accepted the position. My first project was establishing a scholarship fund for women starting businesses after major life transitions, divorce, widowhood, immigration, or escaping domestic abuse. We called it the Phoenix Rising Initiative, and within 6 months, we'd helped 200 women across 8 countries launch new careers or expand existing businesses. 2 years after leaving San Francisco, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. The return address showed it was from David, now serving a 2-year federal sentence for conspiracy and wire fraud. Elena, I know I have no right to contact you, and I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted you to know that I've had a lot of time to think about the man I became and the woman I destroyed in the process. Prison has a way of stripping away all the lies you tell yourself. I can't blame Isabella or work stress or anything else for my choices. I chose to betray you, steal from our marriage, and try to destroy you when you fought back. You deserved so much better. You were loyal, supportive, and loving, and I repaid that by systematically deceiving and exploiting you. There's no excuse for my behavior. I heard through my attorney that you're incredibly successful in Singapore, helping other women build their own businesses. I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished, even though I have no right to feel anything about your life. I hope someday you can forgive me, not for my sake, but so you can be completely free of any anger about our marriage. You deserve peace and happiness. I destroyed everything good in my life because of selfishness and cowardice. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into strength and success. That's the difference between us. With sincere regret and respect, David. I read the letter twice, then filed it away. I felt neither anger nor satisfaction, just profound indifference that seemed like the healthiest possible response. Forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't about David's redemption. It was about my own freedom from the past. 3 years after my divorce, I stood in my corner office on the 45th floor of Singapore's Raffles Place Tower, reviewing applications for our latest round of Phoenix Rising scholarships. My design firm now had offices in 6 countries, and the Women's Empowerment Program had helped over 1,000 entrepreneurs launch successful businesses. My assistant knocked and entered. Ms. Rodriguez, you have a video call with the Singapore Prime Minister's office in 10 minutes, then dinner with the Jakarta development team at 7. Thank you, Priya. And remind me to review tonight's scholarship finalists. We're announcing this year's recipients tomorrow. Each scholarship recipient reminded me of myself 3 years ago, intelligent, determined women who just needed someone to believe in their potential and provide practical support. That evening, Dr. Michael Chen and I had dinner at our favorite restaurant overlooking Marina Bay. We'd been dating for 8 months now, a careful, mature relationship built on mutual respect and shared values. Elena, he said over dessert, I have something to tell you. Doctors Without Borders is offering me a position heading their Southeast Asian operations. My heart skipped. That's incredible, Michael. It's exactly what you've been working toward. The position is based in Singapore. I'd be traveling frequently, but my home base would be here. He paused. I wanted to make sure that wouldn't complicate things between us. I smiled, realizing that 3 years ago, I would have been analyzing his words for hidden meanings, looking for signs of deception or abandonment. Now, I simply heard a good man sharing good news. It wouldn't complicate anything. It sounds like the perfect opportunity for you. Elena, I need you to know something. I've never met anyone like you, someone who's faced such betrayal and emerged stronger rather than bitter. You inspire me every day. Michael, you don't need to. Let me finish. I'm not asking for any commitments or promises. I just want you to know that whatever we have, however long it lasts, being with you has made me a better person. Later that night, I stood on my apartment balcony looking out over Singapore's glittering skyline. The city never slept. Lights twinkled in office buildings where people were pursuing their own dreams of success and reinvention.
My phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer Liu, the young woman I'd met at the Entrepreneurs Summit. Elena, my consulting firm, just landed its biggest client ever. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself.
I smiled and typed back, "You did the work, Jennifer. I just reminded you that you were capable of it." As I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 34, I looked younger than I had at 31 during the final months of my marriage. The stress lines around my eyes had faded, replaced by laugh lines from genuine happiness. I thought about the woman I'd been when I first discovered David's text messages, devastated, frightened, convinced her world was ending. That woman couldn't have imagined the life I was living now. David had given me the greatest gift possible, though he'd never intended it. He'd forced me to discover my own strength, to build something that belonged entirely to me, to become someone who would never again allow her worth to be determined by another person's treatment of her. The phoenix had risen from the ashes of betrayal, and she was soaring higher than she'd ever dreamed possible. From the Singapore Business Times, March 15, 2029. Elena Rodriguez, founder of Rodriguez Design International and director of the Phoenix Rising Initiative, was honored yesterday with the ASEAN Woman of the Year award. Rodriguez, who moved to Singapore 5 years ago after a high-profile divorce, has built her firm into one of Asia's most prestigious design companies, while simultaneously helping over 2,000 women across the region launch successful businesses after major life transitions. I kept the newspaper clipping on my office wall next to a photo of my latest project, a sustainable housing development in Vietnam that would provide affordable homes for 10,000 families. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Rodriguez, you have the board meeting for Phoenix Rising Foundation at 2 p.m., the design team conference call with our Bangkok office at 4, and dinner with the Malaysian Development Group at 7. Thank you, Priya. And please remind me to review the scholarship applications we're choosing this year's recipients tomorrow." 5 years after David's betrayal had shattered my world, I was living a life that exceeded my wildest dreams. My design firm employed over 200 people across 8 countries. The Phoenix Rising Initiative had provided $50 million in funding and mentorship to female entrepreneurs. I owned a beautiful penthouse apartment, traveled the world for both business and pleasure, and woke up every morning excited about the day ahead. Most importantly, I'd learned to trust myself completely. I made decisions based on my own judgment, pursued relationships that enhanced rather than diminished me, and never again allowed anyone to define my worth. My phone rang. Sarah calling from San Francisco. "Elena, I have news. David was released from federal prison last month." I felt a flicker of something, not fear exactly, but wariness. "How is he doing?" Not well. His law license was permanently revoked. He's working as a paralegal in Oakland, and from what I hear, he's become something of a recluse. He never remarried, never really recovered from the destruction of his career." I felt genuine sadness hearing about David's continued struggles. Despite everything he'd done, I took no pleasure in human suffering. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said and meant it. "Elena, you're a better person than most people would be after what he put you through." Hating David wouldn't give me back the years he stole, and celebrating his misery would make me smaller than I want to be. That evening, Michael and I had dinner at Marina Bay Sands, celebrating the 5th anniversary of my arrival in Singapore. We'd been married for 2 years now, a partnership between equals built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. "Lena," he said, raising his wine glass. 5 years ago, you arrived in Singapore with 2 suitcases and a determination to rebuild your life. Look what you've accomplished." I looked out over the city skyline, remembering the frightened, broken woman who'd sat in that San Francisco courtroom, fighting for her financial survival. That woman had felt powerless, convinced she had no options beyond accepting whatever scraps her husband chose to offer. She could never have imagined the life I was living now. "You know what I'm most proud of," I said. "Not the business success or the awards or the money. It's that I refused to let David's betrayal make me bitter or afraid. I chose to use that pain as motivation to become someone stronger." Michael squeezed my hand. "That's why I fell in love with you.
not because you survived betrayal, but because you transformed it into wisdom and compassion for others. Later that night, I sat at my desk reviewing scholarship applications for the Phoenix Rising Initiative. One file particularly caught my attention, a 35-year-old woman named Anna Chen, whose husband had abandoned her and their 2 children after she'd supported his medical residency. Anna had written, "I feel like I've lost everything. My marriage, my financial security, my sense of who I am. But I refuse to let his abandonment define the rest of my life. I want to study international business and build something that belongs only to me and my children." I approved her application immediately and made a note to personally mentor her through the program. As I prepared for bed, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal, the legal battles, the intimidation attempts, the loneliness of starting over in a foreign country, all of it had been necessary to become the woman I was today. I was no longer Elena Rodriguez Hartwell, the accommodating wife who'd sacrificed her identity to maintain someone else's comfort. I was Elena Rodriguez, successful, independent, and unshakable in my knowledge of my own worth. The pearl earrings my grandmother had left me caught the lamplight as I turned off my desk lamp. She'd always said that diamonds were formed under pressure, and strong women were too. I'd been tested by betrayal and emerged as something unbreakable. The best revenge against deception wasn't bitterness or anger. It was building a life so fulfilling that you eventually felt grateful for the experiences that forced you to grow. David had given me the greatest gift possible. He'd set me free to become who I was always meant to be, and I had never looked back. Elena Rodriguez continues to live and work in Singapore, where her design firm has become one of Asia's most successful luxury consultancies. The Phoenix Rising Initiative has provided over $100 million in funding and support to female entrepreneurs across Southeast Asia. Her memoir, Shattered Trust, a story of betrayal and resilience, became an international bestseller and has been translated into 15 languages. She serves on the boards of multiple women's empowerment organizations and is a sought-after speaker on topics of entrepreneurship, resilience, and personal transformation. She and Dr. Michael Chen have established the Rodriguez Chen Foundation, which provides medical care and business training to underserved communities throughout Southeast Asia. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a much better one.